what's up? Hello, I hope you all are doing well. Today I am doing a book to series comparison of a book that I just loved in 2019, and the more I've thought about it since then, I don't know that I love it as much, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And it's right here I'll say that this is entirely full of spoilers for both the book and for the series. So if you're not interested in interacting with spoilers for either of those pieces of media, thanks for coming. See you later. Now, I received this copy as an advanced copy from the publisher, so thank you to the lovely folks who sent this to me before it was published, and I just enjoyed it so much. This is the story of a band called The Six in the 1970s in America, and a woman called Daisy Jones who is singing with them and eventually becomes part of the band, right? And the point of this book is that it's telling the story of the reason that this band broke up very suddenly, very abruptly, many years ago, and none of them has spoken about the topic until this person goes to do all of these interviews and discovers and pieces together the facts of the story. And right on the front, it said, everyone was there, everyone remembers it differently. This is told as an oral history, almost like a documentary of everyone that the author, not Taylor Jenkins Reid, but the author of the book can get a hold of to reflect on what they remember from the time period. And she kind of cut and pastes all of their interviews together to figure out what really happened. And in doing so, you get to see everyone's differences of opinion, differences in what they remember, and how they, like it says, remember things differently. It was for that reason that I thought this book really worked. And you can go back and watch my review of that if you care to. And so I was interested when the show finally came out. And so I've watched all of it now, and I thought I would walk through just a few of the many ideas that came up for me while watching this about how this was translated from this book onto I think it was 10 episode series. And I will say I have quite a bit to say, so get ready, buckle up, and I invite your graciousness as I consistently reference my notes that are off camera. So let's begin with the story. Overall, I felt that this was a sound dramatization. All the main points of the story are there, the pieces about morality, the pieces of the human condition, the pieces about the artistic process and what comes with that, and the struggles that happen in that process. All of those are there. You're meant to get those from the book, and they come across in the series too. So as an adaptation, as my partner says, or an adaptation, it worked. All the main points are there. The goal of any adaptation is to convey, I think, with as much accuracy as possible, the necessary major points of the story, and this series does that. As you might expect, as people who spend a lot of time picking apart books, I'm gonna go ahead and push through that overall quality and pick apart different pieces of it. And we'll start here with the way that Billy and Daisy are portrayed in the story. I'm not really going to get into anything about the actors and like who their real personalities are and how they might come through on the screen or anything like that, or who's the son of another major actor or something. I'm not going to do any of that, but I will say, so the story in the series portrays Billy and Daisy, I think, a little bit more amicably than the book does. In the book, I really remember the two of them disliking each other a lot more, and I think that comes across because all of the book is post-experience. Every single person in the book is reflecting on something that has happened in the past. They are providing a memory. They are recounting after the fact, and the years of resentment and bitterness are evident in the language that gets used. Whereas I think the show, it does demonstrate that to some extent. You get these moments of, Billy saying like, did Daisy agree to do this? But it's less kind of spiked with hatred and more of just like, well, I don't want to be the one to say something if that other person isn't going to say it. Like, it feels more like they don't want to get in trouble as opposed to like, well, I don't like this person and I'm not gonna speak about them. And the show does a really great job demonstrating how the two of them mirror each other. But I think makes the mistake of going a little bit too hard on their chemistry and pushing that as romantic love. And it's clear in the book that attraction is there. Like, there are feelings that are welling up in both of them for each other, but the series pushes really hard on that. And it pushes in that direction as opposed to what I'll call an artistic pull. And those are really two separate things. The draw of someone who is creating something with you is a really unique experience. Like you see it in something like ice skaters, right? When the pairs ice skate, like those people are not often totally in love with the people that they're skating with. Often pairs work really well together. They work creatively very well with whoever is doing the choreography or putting together the routine or whatever it's called really in ice skating. You see that artistic collaboration happen in a way that is not romantic love. It is separate, although shares similarities, but it is separate from romantic love. And in this series, they show both. And leaning more heavily into that romantic angle for me was a little bit disappointing. But I'm guessing that choice was made because if you're watching this as someone who is not familiar with that deeply collaborative, creative process, those really strong feelings might be hard to show on screen without it feeling forced or without it coming across as like, oh, they just didn't go all the way into the story of their romance, I guess. I think the other piece that really got me with this storyline was right before they go on the Aurora tour. They're just starting rehearsals for Aurora, the album that they're all putting out together as Daisy Jones and the Six. Daisy chooses to run off to Greece and for some reason gets married to the son of an Irish prince there. There are so many things that are different in that plot line than they are in the book. So this happens relatively in 1977, 1978, right? So only a few short years after, guess what? The Turkish coup in Cyprus, where Greece and Turkey are warring over whose island that is. Greece is not yet in the European Union. And I can't imagine that during this like pinnacle age of the rise of international air travel, that Greece would have been an easy a place to get to as it is today. That's just my speculation. Obviously, I wasn't there. Now, in the book, she flings herself off to Thailand, which admittedly is, at that time, probably an even harder place to get to because Thailand wasn't really a tourist destination quite yet. But honestly, Thailand and the difficulty of getting there and the lack of people who are likely to be there that are like her feels much more Daisy to me than a very resort-like town in Southern Europe. And the choice that was made in the show felt like an easier choice than the one that she makes in the book. She wants to hide. That's the reason that she runs. She wants to hide because she's upset about what's said about her. And Greece, honestly, isn't the best place to do that, though they do try to portray it that way. We then have Nicky, who is apparently Irish and says he's the son of a prince. Let me tell you, the Irish monarchy formally ended in the beginning of the 20th century. So medieval historians could perhaps offer you the finer details of Ireland's ancient monarchical structure, but this means that there is a possibility that Nicky's character could claim his like weird position as the son of an Irish prince and have that be factually accurate, but really he could have just said rich guy. The fact that there's an Irish actor in this role and they want to keep the prince thing from the book, those two choices don't line up to me. It's a really strange choice to make that navigates away from the text. In the book, Nicky, whose name she calls him short for Niccolo, is an Italian prince, which historically is much easier to prove the lineage of. And I think would have made more sense and have been more appealing to like a sad, scared, coked out Daisy like the one in the book. So why did we not just open a casting call for an Italian person? Like, did we confuse our eye countries when we wrote the casting announcement? I don't know what happened there. Maybe it was just they really wanted that actor to play him and he was Irish and not Italian, so like, oh, ultimately it doesn't matter. But her going to Greece, I guess, and meeting an Irish person because those two countries are much closer than Italy and Thailand, I guess it would have made more sense. But in the book it makes sense that a rich person who is claiming to be the son of an Italian prince finding himself laying around every day at a resort in Thailand where this giant musical star happens to show up because she wants to escape, to me makes a lot more sense than doing that in Greece with an Irish person. I don't know why they made that choice when ultimately what they needed to get out of the relationship between those two characters was a sense of manipulation and the overarching knowledge for us as the viewer/reader that those two are not the right pairing. Why does it matter? I don't know, just feels historically inaccurate in the story to make that change. Why would you make that type of change unless you needed to? Other things that didn't make sense to me are that there are a whole bunch of songs for which the text is printed in the back of the book. Songs are all there. Those, for the most part, are not the songs that you hear them sing in the show. Lyrics to the ones that are similar: Aurora, Honeycomb, which is only in parens in the track title in the show. The lyrics are not the same. I'm sitting there listening to it, I'm looking through the book, the lyrics are not the same. I don't know why we would make that change. Sure, maybe the lyrics in the book aren't that great. Like, just because Taylor Jenkins Reid is a successful narrative author does not mean that she is a songwriter. So sure, we're not going to get into those changes, I guess, otherwise we'll be here all day, and we're already going to be here for a while. So moving on, next, Billy and Camilla are meant to have 3 children, and their second and third children were not included in the series the way they were in the book. What I remember from reading the book is that Billy misses the birth of his first child, Julia, and then much is made of him having to go to the births of his second and third children throughout the rest of the book, or at least committing himself more to those second and third children as they are born throughout the rest of the book. And that is what shows him and his dedication to Camilla and his family. Those children, those second and third children, are left out of the series, and like maybe they weren't included because of the huge effort that it takes just on its face to get infant and child actors and work around all of those rules, and they really only wanted to do it with like 1 child. But that must be the reason. Like, why would you take those 3 children in that part of the book out? It shortens up the narrative, sure, like we're not going to make a 20 episode season of television here, but I don't know that there was necessarily an analogous piece of Billy's behavior that showed his undying commitment to his family with just the 1 child, whereas it would have been a lot stronger had there been 3 children. And they talk about having more children, but we never see it happen. And those are very different things. And lastly, in the storyline, I have to talk about the ending, because that was the one part of the book that I did not enjoy. I found it trite, I found it dramatic, and I found it very heavy-handed. I also kind of didn't see another way for it to end. Like, I get why she did it that way, but I found it to be a lot. And the ending in the series is much more trite, but less dramatic than the books. Thank goodness. And while I think they should have retained the scene where Daisy is so high/drunk that she can't even open the door to her own hotel room, and Camilla has to do it for her, and then they have this conversation where Camilla lays out rules for like what the rest of their future is going to look like, either together or apart. Julia in the book interjects in a way that I really hate, and in the series interjects her memory for the first time in a way that is so much less dramatic than it is in the book. It works so much better and actually makes the ending to the series like a little bit more pleasant and uplifting, so I think I'm okay with it overall. And some of this has to do with the way that the story is formatted, right? She stops the transcript and she's like, I am the only one that can corroborate Daisy's story because I was there. That doesn't happen here. She just pipes in and she says, yeah, I remember that. And all the people that she's interviewing are like, do you really? How could you? You were so young. And then like it unfolds in a very natural type of way. Much cleaner, much nicer. Someone thought that through. Now that change really speaks to the overall format of the book, of which there are many differences between these 2 pieces of media. The book is an oral history, right? Cut and pasted different pieces of a variety of interviews that are put together into relevant sections to create smaller narratives that put in order form a larger narrative that is the book. The demonstration there is that the author is getting all of these people to speak on the record about something difficult for the first time in a very long time, and she has put their different snippets together in a way that's going to make sense for a reader rather than just printing straight interview after straight interview. Fine. That format to me seems most analogous to a documentary, where there are lots of people, lots of talking heads, telling you something, recalling something, and then their voice is overlaid with either images or video from the past. The show, however, was a third-person observation. It was a third-person perspective of what actually happened, right? So you're getting this big, long narrative that is occasionally interspersed with someone's interview with a talking head that, like, comes on for a few sentences, if that, to corroborate what's going on, or to, like, provide a knowing look or something like that, which it's a it's a quasi-documentary. It's not really a documentary style though. They're like trying to get to it and they're not quite getting there. But the style of the show is a lot more like what we would think of as typical movies and television, right? And in order for this book to really work for a visual format, there has to be something to keep the viewer interested. It really can't just be constant jump cuts of, somebody from the past talking about the past to another person talking about the past. That gets boring. So I understand the reason that they made the shift to showing the reality of what happened. The series shows the band, etc., the other additional people remembering, rather than letting them tell us the story the way that they do in the book. It preserves the essence of the story, right? And gives us action to hold our attention as opposed to just simply listening to recollection. And it does a good job. However, what we lose in this style is the inconsistency in the way that people remember the same thing. Just like it says on the front, everyone was there, but everyone remembers it differently. We don't necessarily really get that in this style, right? We get an interesting story of people who are keeping secrets from each other and are mad at each other and are in conflict with each other, but we don't get those differences of remembering. We just kind of get people in interviews saying things that are slightly different to one another, and sometimes you'll get like a coy allusion from someone that like, oh, I'm not going to tell you that, and it just comes across as people keeping secrets, which we get it. We know that they are, but it doesn't translate well when you're witnessing the story from a third-person perspective, coming from a recitation of rememberings. So while it works, while I can see the steps that they took to make it into a show that would be interesting and hold your attention, we do lose what the cover of my copy, at least, might indicate is kind of the main point of structuring the book the way it was structured, and thereby structuring the story the way it was structured. What we do retain are the setting and the characters, which is delightful. Huge admiration in this for the costumers and the music directors and the set dressers, all of those people in the show. Everything feels perfectly 70s, and I wasn't there, but from what I have seen and read about the 70s, the vibe really seems to check out. The sound really seems to check out. Plus, my dad has watched this show and he was an audio engineer during that time period, and he was actually reporting to me that the show has really strong accuracy with the recording equipment and the instruments and the audio production technology that was used. So good job to the people who worked on that. And delightfully, we have pretty much all the same characters. I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on each and every one of them, but I did pick out a handful that I had strong feelings about. And the first one is Camilla. Camilla has in the book both like a Mary Sue level of patience and like outrageous saintly vibes of strength. She is always the one who is willing to do the right thing and ready to tell Billy like, hey, you need to get yourself together, and is always just going to commit and be there for them from like pure strength of belief and will. And it comes across in the series as well, and remarkably so. The actor who plays Camilla, incredible. I can't help but think I've heard her voice somewhere else, and I can not to, even to this day, a few days later, figure out where it's from. But from the shift from Camilla in the book doing the recollection to us watching Camilla live it out in the third person observation in the series, we get to sort of see like a softness and a vulnerability that Camilla is masking in all of her interviews. Like her responses in the book are definitely her trying to keep a level head and, I'm going to reflect the past the way that I want to reflect the past. And you get a little bit of that too when it comes to the interviews of her that we get to watch. But the show lets you see a little bit more of her struggle with patience and always committing to Billy day after day, a little bit more than you get from just her telling us what she did or telling us the way she remembers things happened. It's kind of neat. It kind of is a little bit of the foil to the saintly Camilla that we get in the book. Which is not to say that Camilla is not a saint, because wow, the strength in that character She is probably like the driving force of the novel. One might think it would be Daisy, but I think ultimately it's Camilla. Not that they did Daisy like all of the justice I was hoping for. So we missed in the series all of Daisy's career story from when she had a solo career. Like, I get that it's just easier to portray her as a neglected, traumatized child who like turns to music and drugs to escape for the sake of television. I get that. I get that that's a lot easier to do. But by cutting the fact that she had success on her own, really they gave that angle to her early relationship with Teddy and Teddy believing in her. But by cutting her solo success, they kind of demonstrate that her character 100% needed Billy, and that Billy 100% needed her in order for their music individually to sound amazing. Like, they absolutely needed to be writing together in order for either of them to produce something of quality. And they have that healthy respect for each other and their artistic processes in the book. That is for sure. They made each other better in the show. Like, it was clear they brought out their artistic bests, but Daisy had the beginnings of her own career, and I felt it was a slight to her character to not include that. Like, leaving it out gives the audience the go-ahead to feel like they should be sympathetic to this disaffected and zany yet brilliant addict type of character who needs this man in order for her to access her final form. That's what it kind of invites us to do. Really playing into the romanticization of the tortured artist. And she's a little bit of that in the book, but she's not entirely that in the book. So while the portrayal of the actor who plays her is remarkable, there was certainly room, I think, in production and in the writing for her character to have grown in the choices that were made when they adapted the book for screen. The other person they made some real choices with was Simone. I actually only have one real issue with Simone's storyline. I'm sure there are more, but I'll start positively by saying that I appreciated the changes that they made to her relationship with Daisy, where she is more of a friend as opposed to like an older sister / mother figure, which is what she comes across as in the book. This is a much more like peer-to-peer, I'm a little bit ahead of you in my career, but still at the same time, like, we can lean on each other in a peer-to-peer way relationship that's on screen, and I thought that that was a nice change that they made. That's really exemplified, I think, by the fact that she doesn't on screen drag Daisy back from her foreign adventure by forcing her into a taxi and dragging her to the airport the way that she does in the book. Daisy actually winds up coming back to the States from Greece on her own and goes out of her way to make amends with Simone, as opposed to having to be like corralled into a car and brought back by force. However, in the show, Simone winds up in a verbal altercation with Daisy right before she leaves. And at that point, Daisy is not only under the influences of substances, but she's also under the influence of Nikki. And she offends Simone so completely that the character just leaves without another word. And it is in that moment that we as the viewer see the insidiousness of Nikki as a character and how he is weaponizing Daisy's friends against her. And it just works beautifully to demonstrate how he is such a bad choice for Daisy's life. On its face, sounds like a great screenwriting decision. It works to demonstrate him as a plot point, but underneath that, the whole scene is so painful. It is so emotionally painful, and ultimately it's most painful that the show chooses to use a Black, gay, female character's pain to expose a white man's true character. While that may be historically accurate, it is no less painful to watch. It was a huge moment in the show. It was a deeply, deeply painful moment in the show, and that's about all I can say about it. Some less painful, but still irritating people, Eddie. Now, in the book, Eddie is Chuck Loving's younger brother, and he is roped into the band because Chuck, who is an initial band member, is drafted to the war in Vietnam and dies there. And there is no one in the story in the book who goes to dental school and opens a retirement account, as there is in the show. There is no one that forces Eddie from guitar to bass. And in the book, a guy called Pete plays the bass the entire time and like has a girlfriend back home and pretty much is just like on the road with the band, keeps a low profile, and is like, yeah, at the end of this, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna marry her and I'm just gonna live my life. Okay, cool. So they kind of made Chuck in the show a combination of those two people. Whereas in the book Eddie awkwardly like takes over for his dead brother on rhythm guitar. which causes drama purely then in the book from his personality, not from an instrumental shift level slight. If I had to guess, it seems like this change was made because they needed a stronger impetus for him to be put upon, and it would follow better for a casual viewer who hasn't read the book, and like this one just worked out. But I am disappointed that they didn't use the brother situation and that they didn't include Chuck, because obviously there would have been some grief and some trauma there, which might have affected Eddie's character in interacting with Billy as a leader. But also, I'm disappointed that they chose not to show the global, greater context of the US at the time and the realities that were happening and the impact on individuals' lives. Like, we can set the borough on fire in the Half-Blood Prince movie to show, like, the danger that's out in the wizarding world, but we can't have the draft in a historical fiction series? I just have a lot of questions. I think had they kept the original plot there, it would have worked out better, and then it would have contributed to the numbers, right? Like, honorable mention to whoever has this creative use of numbers there. Like, the 5-person band that is called the Six, and Camilla in the show is now like the 6th honorary member. Like, just make there be 6 people. If they had left it alone, there would have been 6 people in the band called the Six, and then there would have been Daisy Jones. Ergo, Daisy Jones and the Six. Numbers would have made sense. So like I said, it was a choice. They should have just left Eddie, the book Eddie, and it would have been fine. Would have been fine. Would have made a lot more sense. Numbers would have worked out. Would have been fine. And speaking of the numbers, the person in the show who wants to name the band the Six is Karen. Let's talk about Karen. No casting choice shows any greater allusions to the real-life band of Fleetwood Mac than this one. Casting a keyboardist who is a hot English lady that is in a relationship with another band member is the absolute biggest call-out to the late Christine McVie, may she rest in peace, that they could possibly have done. And I get why they did that. I get that they wanted to make those, similarities clear, but book Karen is actually called Karen, and there's a joke in there, and she's from Pittsburgh, and she has like roughly the same attitude about her life choices, and she really wants to commit to like being a woman in music and not being a front person. That's fine. In this, we start to see her more as like, I want to be a rock star, like I want to be a female rock star, and I think they could have demonstrated Karen's want to committing to being a female in music without having to cast a posh English person to do it. Is Suki Waterhouse gorgeous and plays the role well? Yes. Is she really bringing Karen from page to stage? No, it's a different Karen. It is the Karen as a Christine McVie allegory. I'd be interested to learn why that casting choice was made if it did not have exact Fleetwood Mac connotations. Because she also makes Karen into a little bit of a party girl. She's like the cool older sister who always has the drugs and like knows what's up and is like disaffected from her own feelings and puts them in a box and who just wants to make the music and party for the rest of her life. And that's not the vibe we get from Karen in the book. It would be impossible to talk about this story, whether the book or the series, but this story on the whole, without again mentioning the similarities to Fleetwood Mac. If you know anything at all about this band, the proxies are obvious. Billy is the proxy for Lindsey Buckingham, Daisy for Stevie Nicks, Karen and Graham for Christine and John McVie. It's even like achingly clear to me watching the show that the song Regret Me was analogous to Stevie Nicks' incredible hit Silver Spring. And Taylor Jenkins Reid has given interviews about how Fleetwood Mac inspired her to write this book in so many ways, and how it came from her wonderings about the band. And as someone who actively listens to Fleetwood Mac myself, I've often wondered if my glowing review of the book in 2019 was misguided, and whether this book even needed to be written, and whether this show really needed to be made. What do we get from this story, from seeing this story on screen even, that we don't get from having accounts and knowledge and news articles and interviews with like the real life people who influenced every one of these characters? What do we get from this? And ultimately, having reflected on that some more, I think the answer is closure. We get closure on a story that is similar enough to real life that we will never get, really, from those real people. And I think there's kind of something nice about that, particularly for those of us who are fans of the real band. And that being said, I was delighted in the long cold open of the episode after Daisy's near-death overdose that they actually used the song Gold Dust Woman, which, no matter whose interpretation of what that song is about you believe, is entirely apt 100% for that scene. And had they gotten any further into the show without playing a Fleetwood Mac song, it would have been an absolute travesty in my opinion, so it really hit at just the perfect time. At the end of the day, I really like this story. It speaks to a lot of my interests. It's easy enough to follow. The book was done in an interesting format. The show gave us something that the book couldn't, for better or for worse. And ultimately, it portrays the essence of the original text. So, it works for me. This isn't even touching on the acting quality, on like all of those film, cinema type of things that I don't know anything about. I know about books. That's where my thoughts lie. I'm sure there are folks out there who have lots of comments, so I welcome your comments in the comments section. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having lovely weeks and lovely lives. If there's anything that you want to know about us, it's probably in the description. And we'll see you very soon.